We just had a morning session discussion around the gaming industry in the Middle East, and I wanted to talk to you first about what do you see as the hot trends today in the gaming sector, more globally speaking, and more regionally speaking.
Basically, globally, we are seeing, of course, the mobile is putting the rules of the game today. So mobile and tablets, when we say, and we have no longer, the mass of the online MMO trend that we had in the past couple of years. So I think the global market is going mobile in gaming.
And why is that, right? Guys, take a stab at it, anyone.
So basically one of the things we've seen is that in the past, when you're developing a game or you want to start up a game studio, you have a lot of obstacles, whether it's creating the content, so the tools to create the content, or the economics of it, sort of the distribution and monetization. And that's becoming much more feasible at arm's length to any developer, regardless of whether you're in San Francisco or Dubai. You still have access to these tools that allows you to develop and market your product up to a large studio level. So there is no sort of the level of entry there is a lot easier.
Okay, so we're saying it becomes easier to actually produce mobile games because of the kind of platforms that are available as well. But we were discussing also the opportunity to monetize mobile games versus Facebook games, right? Can you give our audience, share some of the statistics that we were just talking about in terms of...
Yeah, I mean, the slightly terrifying thing when you think about it, I was at Mobile World Congress earlier this year, and you go around their Apps World section where there's constantly a bombardment of companies who are offering cost per install or cost per ranking services, where they're charging you, somewhere between $2 and $3 for a user, right, to download your application. But when you look at it, the average lifetime value of a user in an iOS application in the US is about $2, right, compared to Japan where it's $20. So people are buying users that they're not making money from, and that's a big problem in terms of that side of things, in terms of user acquisition. I mean, monetization, we're still getting there. I mean, there's a lot of interesting companies in the space doing display stuff, but it hasn't quite taken off globally yet.
Okay, so one of the problems we're saying then is it's tough to monetize on Facebook specifically, right? Acquisition costs are high compared to the actual lifetime value of the customer. And hence the shift to mobile, partly because now it's cheaper to work on mobile. Iman, you work specifically to help gaming companies monetize. Tell us a little bit about how you work with the gaming companies and with the brands.
Yeah, so what Kiip does is it allows brands to reward people for achievements that they have in games. So if you complete a level, or if you kill the boss, or if you have a personal best in a workout app, you can get a coffee from Starbucks or some in-game currency sponsored by Pepsi, or anything like that. So we work with hundreds and hundreds of developers around the world, and some of the biggest brands in the world as well. So the kind of Procter & Gamble's, Pepsi's of this world. And so what we found was two things. One, the way that people were making money from mobile games from an advertising standpoint before was a really crappy user experience. So you would see a display ad, you would accidentally hit against it, you would be popped out to a browser window or to a download screen, so it was a disruptive experience. So we thought that should be better. And two, we saw the appetite for brands to get involved in games because they see the volume of user, or the user base that big games have. So we thought, well, let's try and marry these two up, and that achievement moment made sense for us, where you get a reward. So we see a massive appetite from brands, right? They understand that this, is a series. Brands in the US always talk about these Super Bowl moments. Well, Angry Birds and games like that are having Super Bowl moments probably every hour. So there's an appetite to get involved. They see the engagement. All you've got to do is sit on a plane or take a bus or go anywhere, and you'll see the amount of time that people are spending playing games on phones or games on tablets. So brands want to do this. They want to partner with games. They want to work with them.
Can you tell us about some case studies or success stories that you have, just to give us a sense of how this actually works and maybe the impact for the brand or the impact for the game developer?
Yeah, so brands always look for things like, how is this affecting some of the softer metrics that they have? So brand awareness, recall of brand, all this kind of stuff. And then they also look for things like return on investment now. So they're getting smarter. So we've worked with, Pepsi is probably one of our biggest clients, and we've done a bunch of different campaigns with them where they have sponsored virtual currency, they've sponsored free MP3s within games. So it's like, oh, hey, you're amazing. Pepsi wants to give you effectively like a digital high five. Or they have a new type of energy drink that's coming out, and they want people to try it out and do some sampling. So they'll go, well, here's a free coupon, go to your local department store, get a free Pepsi, try it out, see what you like. And it's that kind of reward for achieving something that drives the person there. So those are the types of things that we see working really well, where there's mobile couponing and you can just walk into a store and walk out with, you know, a reward. And also the virtual currency rewards tend to work really well for us. So, I mean, I think that kind of the big brands are always after ways of just getting in front of people and engaging with them, and games is one of the best ways to do that at the moment. So that's what we try and allow them to do.
Continuing with the theme of monetization, can you guys give us some of your thoughts on kind of what's new in monetization? How are game developers really able to monetize these days?
I will share a portion of so my Salward, we have been here in the market of the mobile gaming since the past 10 years, and we went from in 2003 until 2007, the only monetization model was to go through telcos. And that was, you know, as much as it was hard in terms of the share that you share with the operators, but was the only possible monetization model. The app stores came, and our relation with the user changed between B2B, where we're working with the operators, and he was dealing with our players. Today, we're dealing with the players directly, and as we said, we are still learning. There's nothing can be confirmed. Everyone is trying his best today to find the best monetization model. If anyone, you know, there's no model that you can follow today. The best to monetize today is the virtual currency and the integration of the in-app purchases. We are living in a freemium model today for the mobile games. No one can go premium today. So we have to be freemium, and to be freemium, and with all the difficulty of getting the real money from people, we are trying our best to do the virtual kind of currency. So today, telcos are out. They will come soon, but they're for the moment they are out.
They're out.
They are out for the moment until they, you know, they are coming. Android is giving them another chance by, you know, operator is billing, operator is the connectivity, and connectivity with the biggest app store towards iOS was impossible. So the only people who can integrate today in the smartphone era that we live is Android, and that's what's happening today with Android. So the moment they are connected to the app, the Google World or the Samsung App Store, etc., we will see operators playing again a role in the monetization.
So, but if you look at your historically with operators, beyond just billing, there's a lot of opportunities of things that can be done with operators, right?
Of course,
I mean, operators can really help you create tremendous reach, right? And you've worked with operators significantly.
I'm one of the believers of the good well of the operators in this partnership. I'm someone who's keeping until today the relation with the operators.
And I agree, actually. And I think that operators have a role to play for any kind of content, because they can actually sell content, right? They can help you monetize it through distribution, which we talked about, and through monetization.
Your relation with operators is like your relation, you know, with your wife, when sometimes you reach a moment that, you know, separation, and then you put your rules again, so to keep the marriage. So there was a moment with the operator that you need to put the rules with your wife, and so you can, you know, I'm coming 11 at night, I'm working with my girlfriend, and it's all the rules that you put with the operators, and today they agreed in a way or another. So, but as you said, Omar, distribution, you need them. Reach, to know who's having an iOS phone or Android or etc. They are the only people who have, because whatever I analyze the data that is coming from the game, it's assumptions. It's just, you know, we are predicting the data that is coming from our games, but the real data and the real Omar, how much he's spending every day or every month on his bill, can help us to do the in-app purchases correctly in our games.
Muhammad, did you have some thoughts on the matter?
My point of view is a little bit different. Okay, we come from a technical perspective. I'm not a big fan of operators.
Okay.
I'll be honest to you, because I see this as a lock-in. I mean, if you think about it, if I'm going to develop an application where I'm going to be doing in-app purchase or some sort of purchase with the consumer, and it's going to be fully integrated with the operator, that means my kit, my APIs or my code is only available for that particular operator. And now we're in a global, you know, economy. I want to be able to build an app, and I'm based in Botswana. I want a guy in the US to buy it, or Europe. Well, me as a small indie developer, there's no way in hell I'm going to have the reach to be able to have access to any operator and be able to do billing and stuff. So I think it's there might be some uses for it, but I think it just narrows down the market. On the other hand, where we look at, for example, what Kiip does, where we're seeing the freemium model, where we're seeing that there's a race to zero. In the past, when Palm had the App Store, they were selling apps for $60, and then it dropped to $4.99, so the general market. Now, like Noor was saying, it's a freemium model. And that can only happen if you have an open market. That means I can compete, but again, going back to the operator, if I have my code locked to a specific operator, I can't, how many operators are gonna compete in Jordan? There are like 4 operators.
Right.
Each one will behave separately. That means if I'm gonna make an app,
And I think
I
some
have to
people are trying to bring together the operators and say, here's an opportunity for us to work with a lot of operators. I think from the operator side, all of them are, of course, freaking out. They're saying, how do I get a piece of this action? Voice revenue is down, data revenue is down. I need to make some money somehow, right?
Omar, to be honest, I also agree a little bit. No one likes marriage, but you do it by the end of the day. So basically, Omar, I will tell you something. Operators today, to be honest, they don't care. The portion that you are making from the data revenue that we are generating from the apps today is nothing compared to the total over. So they are not freaking out. Okay, they want to be in the equation. They are
freaking out.
They are not freaking out.
I have to disagree with you because and I don't want to talk all about telecom operators in this session, but maybe they're not freaking out because today they've lost their revenue, but they can see that down the line.
Of course.
They're becoming
exactly.
So they're trying to make some almost preemptive steps, but they don't want to see themselves like the music industry.
I mean, they kind of have to, right? I mean, how many people in this room have WhatsApp on their phone, right? How many people have Skype
how many
on
people
their
here
phone?
have WhatsApp on their
Viber,
phone?
I mean, I was in Riyadh this week, and basically every single person, including taxi drivers, while they were driving us, were using WhatsApp. I mean, it's huge. It's like it's on 97% of phones in some countries. It's in the top 5 in almost every app store, paid app in the world. Skype is obviously doing the same thing. So operators are planning. Certainly, I see it with some of the kind of European operators.
So I want to shift this conversation, right? We said we're talking about distribution now, right? And we said the operators. You've got this complicated marriage, which I like the analogy. What about the app stores, right? We hear that unless you make a big hit in the app store, you can't really make any money, right? Unless you're in the top 10. If you're in the top 10, you make huge amounts of money, and then if you're somewhere in the middle, no one notices you.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
Can
you make money being in the middle of the pack?
We had this discussion, and this is something all over the internet. You have to be in the top 10 to make money. I don't think it's a valid statement because it's a relative statement. I mean, if I'm a small developer and I make $50,000, then that's actually quite profitable. But if I'm EA or some of the big studios, $50,000 is not going to cover the internet access for the studio. So I think it's a relative statement depending on your costs. So as an indie developer, you need to be able to cut down your costs and make sure you're very lean and streamlined until you be able to build your portfolio and your experience and your niche and your sort of direction. I think Noor will probably speak much more about this, where mobile gaming is a hit base. So you have to build so many and go to market and practice and learn and then be able to do your Angry Birds. But you need to survive till then. So keep your costs down, and it could be profitable. You don't have to be in the top 10.
Yeah, I mean, the classic Angry Bird story is, that was Rovio's 51st or 52nd game. I mean, they were on the verge.
But they were also almost shut down.
Yeah. I mean,
right?
they were close to going out of business.
Let's be honest about it, right? We can hope that we will hit that 50th time and hit it big, but we need the small wins or medium wins to be able to survive.
Yeah.
Of course.
So what about, are there other distribution platforms or models, right? We've talked about the operators, we talked about the app stores. Do I have any other options?
We are back also to the real physical distribution. You can see games in the stores today in the US. You can see GameStop in the US. You go, there's no, you go by your tablets or smartphone and you see different scanning barcode that you can scan and download the game directly from a shop. There is a lot of way today to distribute. Pepsi Cola on the can, you can distribute.
What is it? Sorry, tell us about that story.
Pepsi, you can today. Starbucks can be your distribution. If you go to the Starbucks, I'm not sure here in the region we don't have it, but in the UK, the US, you enter and you have you Starbucks card with an iTunes or an app to download. So Starbucks, they are playing part in the distribution of the app. So today, and back Omar to your point and Muhammad point, yes, you need to have different models. That's what we are telling our gaming companies to survive, make a cost minimum, try to survive. Yes, only 10 people who are gaining the money out of the stores and out of the gaming field today, but you have to find different models.
So great. So now we've been talking about this. If you build it, they will come, right? I said this earlier in the morning to Eamon. agree or disagree. How do I get the word out about my game? How do I succeed in actually getting users once I've built it?
My only advice that never buy users. If you want to build a good game, build your game correctly and don't acquire user by paying $3 or one, regardless the money that you have, the investment that you have. Buying user, that means buying, like if you buy your friends. It's like me, I need you to buy my friend, I buy you a car, and yeah, you are my friend. Don't buy user, grow in an organic way, viral, it's yes, slowly the money will come, but it will keep you surviving for a longer time. And that's what we learn from this industry today, that the more you buy users, and this is my only advice, to reach, do it virally. Integrate social, Facebook, Twitter, whatever.
What do you guys think? And how do I get people to use my games?
Yeah, so brand partnerships have been a big part of what we offer to developers who sign up to the Kiip network. So basically, the way it works is if you're in one of our say P&G are doing a big campaign across all of the Kiip network, and then they tweet about the fact that that's happening, and they list out a bunch of games that you can download to get P&G rewards in there. That's huge, right? Because they tweet about it, they've got 1 million followers, or they put it on their Facebook page, they've got 15 million fans. We did we launched in Japan reasonably recently, and we did a deal with a company called Lawson's, which is a massive chain of supermarkets over there, and the reward was fried chicken from Lawson's, right? And it was really successful, right? They love fried chicken, it turns out. But what Lawson's did was they put a section on their homepage of these are the games that you can download in order to win some fried chicken rewards in Japan, and those games went through the roof. So where there are opportunities to have those types of partnerships, where there are opportunities to work with companies like Chartboost and people like this, where there's a reciprocal relationship there, where you're not necessarily doing that kind of creepy cost per install or cost per ranking crap that goes on all the time, those are the ways to get users and talk to people, right? I mean, the biggest issue that I see with developers, especially kind of smaller one-man bands, is that there is that Kevin Costner attitude of if you build it, they will come, right? You've got to go and talk to local blogs. You've got to go and send it to app review sites, not the ones that you pay for. You've got to go and send it to people who will be interesting and try and get people to talk about it, because it just releasing it, it's like a tree falling in the forest. You know, not only is no one there to hear it, also no one cares.
I think in the Middle East there's a good opportunity, believe it or not, for games or apps that are developed in the Middle East to have much better exposure. Because we're still a small community, I think one of the key things that we've seen is that if you look at, if let's say I develop a game, there's a good chance that if, you know, we would recommend that you develop it in Hungarian, for example, and launch it in the App Store in Hungary, because if that picks up in Hungary or Poland, whatever, this will actually have a trickling effect to the App Store and then get you exposure. Because for you to be able to compete, to be in the top 3, for example, in the UAE store, you don't need that many downloads. So leveraging these kind of tricks in sort of not gaming the Apple App Store, but using the community. And if you have a good game, be able to use the social media, which was mentioned today, bring up your downloads in a particular smaller app store, and then be able to have a trickling effect into. So one of the things I would recommend to anybody who's developing an app is make the effort to translate it to different languages. It doesn't cost very much, but the upside is a lot higher than your initial
Maybe
cost.
also it's worth to mention that even working with a game engine like Corona, you have to, your relation with the game engine can help you to push your games, because Corona wants to see their games that's been developed on their platform on the top 10. So keep the relation. Don't buy a license from Corona and sleep on it and do your game. Go and talk with Corona to push your game to their distribution partners. So that's another dimension.
Okay, great. So all very interesting so far. I want to understand. I mean, you work with game developers as well as chairman of the gaming task force, and you are a game developer. You guys both work with gaming companies. If we could, beyond just saying Facebook games versus mobile games, and kind of talk a bit more about what types of games are they, what types of games are being really successful, whether it's like maybe edutainment, whether they're like, I don't know, puzzle strategy games. Are you seeing a change in the type of game that's interesting to people?
I think what we're seeing is really simple games are doing very well, right? Endless Runners, all those types of games, like Temple Run, right, does really well. Games that you don't necessarily need to go through like a 10-step process to understand what you've got to do in the first minute of the game, right? With Angry Birds, which is a great example everyone will always cite, it's kind of clear what you've got to do in it, right? With Temple Run, it's kind of clear that you've got to jump over that gap, you've got to turn left, you've got to turn right. So simple games work really well. puzzle games work really well, especially where they've got that social element baked in, where you can talk about, you talk to your friends or challenge your friends. I think card games are doing really well for us actually in this part of the world. Yeah, card games are
I have to say, actually, I am a big fan of his Tarnib game. I was telling him this. It's one of the few games that I play regularly on the iPad.
And he gave us a good comment.
Yes, I gave him lots of feedback on his AI.
The update that came yesterday came out because of his comment.
Okay, great. Awesome. Interesting. And then, so how do you, if you're talking about simple games, though, of course, the challenge for that is, how do I build a compelling simple game, right? I mean, like, anyone can build a run and jump game. How do I make that game really compelling?
One short comment. Today, honestly, it's not about the game itself. So we were talking yesterday, and there's thousands of studios, thousands of people doing games. It's a complete combination of things that you do so the game can be successful or be appealing for you as Tarnib. So that's the formula today. It's not the gameplay as much as what you are having in the back end of the gameplay. And that comes with all the integration that you need, the engine that you are using, the users that you are interacting with and submitting, bragging your scores, etc. So I think my advice today, when you build a game which is simple or casual or even a very complicated tower defense game, is not the gameplay and the story. It's see your market, the target that you want to target, and see how you can, those users, when you do the first acquisition that you do in your game, to analyze the data that you are doing and see how you can get the updates and do the integration of social, etc. So I think, Omar, we don't have to focus on the story of the game and what's the game as much as the package, the whole package.
Yeah. One of the things that we saw when it comes to mobile gaming is in the beginning, your game didn't have to be very sophisticated. And this is purely because I think the consumer was not sophisticated or demanding and what to expect from a mobile game. And then that trended up where anybody can develop a game and they can compete with some of the big players. But then as the consumer is becoming much more competent or demanding, that sort of wall of entry into game is going up. So now, as a consumer, I expect sharp graphics. I want my app to be running on Android and on iOS. I want sound. I want multiplayer, leaderboards, push notification. So what's happening is the small developer, the indie developer now is coming back in a sense, sort of an uphill struggle where they started, prior to the mobile revolution. And this is where companies like Corona actually sort of comes into play, is that small studio can actually use Corona and a lot of other services to actually compete in the market, delivering high-end, full-featured capabilities.
The polishing
exactly.
the most expensive one.
There isn't a specific genre. The only thing that I would see is, as far as what we've been seeing, whether we were in Game Minion, so one thing we've been seeing is lack of multiplayer games. Because traditionally, multiplayer games were actually difficult to implement, whether it's turn-based or real-time. So I think now, so if you look at today's games, the majority of multiplayer games are relatively done by bigger studios or crappily done by smaller studios. So hopefully, with the new services, a lot of studios will actually release a lot of cool multiplayer games that I think is, in my mind, the next thing that we should see.
Multiplayer games, okay.
Across platforms.
Across platforms.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you're saying like Android,
Facebook,
iOS.
Exactly.
So there is, I know this was an interesting topic because there's a Tarnib game, the other Tarnib game that is popular is trying to do across platforms, although their AI is not as good.
Yeah, no, I think the multiplayer is going to be huge. I mean, I think anyone who watched the Draw Something acquisition last year will know that this idea of almost kind of asynchronous gameplay where you're looking at your friend drawing something as though it's happening in real time, even though they did it on a different platform at a different time. You're like time shifting your multiplayer experience with your friends. I think that's going to be really, really big. And as more people like Songpop and people like that start to figure it out, I think we're going to see really big and interesting things happening there.
So interesting. So now maybe we're concluding that it's not if you build it, they will come. It's like if you bring them, it's kind of not as important what it is you build. Not necessarily true, but rather that the bringing them is at least as important as the building of it. And the bringing them being partnerships with brands, partnerships with operators, partnerships with people who can spread the word, working in multiple languages to get the word out, etc. Interesting. So, but we're also talking about how it's become easier, cheaper, and more rapid to build games, right? And we're talking about iteration, keeping costs low. At the same time, we are not seeing so much of this happening in MENA, right? This is my concern about MENA today, is that it's not that I'm not seeing big success stories. I can accept that. I don't think we're seeing massive success stories in most businesses. I mean, yes, e-commerce is hot and we're seeing some big growth there, but why is it that we're not seeing more iteration, more development more broadly, right? Like, why aren't we seeing a game coming out every week? Today we have to wait. It's like a once in a blue moon that we're getting out new games. Or maybe I'm not hearing about it, but what do you guys think?
First, we need to be realistic about the MENA region. First, we are
how many game developers are there in MENA? Or game development houses?
50, 60, 100. We're still early stage today.
And how many games being developed a year, roughly? What do you guys think?
Talking about my company, we do 25 games a year.
You do 25 games a year?
We have a catalog of today. So it's today, but I will not give my company as an example because we have been here in like the past 10 years. The equation is totally different when it comes to my server than any other company today. But what I would like to say that we are still in a very early stage. We are still stepping in, we are in kindergarten, still in the kindergarten as gaming companies here in the region. And the whole ecosystem is not there. We are playing on the first 2% of the whole ecosystem, the whole equation. So until then, we cannot define today. Something funny, Omar. Yesterday we were having a shisha last night, and we were talking games, etc. And Muhammad said, you know what? You know, we hardly can have this type of conversation in the MENA. Whereas both of us, when we go to the state, sitting in a Starbucks cafe, you can have 10 times this conversation that I had yesterday in every single day that you enter Starbucks.
We don't disagree that we're still in the early stage. Actually, that's what I prefaced the whole conversation saying.
Exactly.
But I want to kind of measure where we are in our progress and growth. Is there something that you can share with us that tells us how far we're going or where we're going to?
If I could just jump in. One thing is, if you think about it, the gaming industry or the developers for games is like any other profession. You know, I mean, doctors in the Middle East or in the MENA didn't pop up, you know, in day one. It took years for them to build up. So why are we expecting that the game development industry is going to be any different? It's exactly the same. On contrary, I think the gaming development industry has a lot more obstacles because imagine I go up to my parents and say, you know what, I'm not going to be a doctor or an engineer. I'm going to develop games. You know, maybe now it's a lot more acceptable, but I guarantee you, you know, a while ago it was difficult. It wasn't an acceptable profession. At least, you know, to be fair, I haven't lived in the Middle East as much as they have. So maybe I'm wrong about this. But this is what I can anticipate is that, you know, as a profession, it's something new. And it will take time. You need to build talent. How can you build an economy based on, you know, people are just coming out of university with no game development experience and expect them to develop games overnight? I think that's unfair. Is it happening? Absolutely. A couple of years ago, we would have never seen all these games coming out. Now, with Maiselward, they're converting one of the games that Corona is developing that is actually a shack game all the way out of the US. You know, no way this sort of happened. So this is a great sign to see that, you know, European and Western companies are recognizing that there is genuine talent in the MENA region to develop technology and develop games.
Is there a way that we can measure, I understand what you guys are saying and I agree with it, we can't be too hard on ourselves and say we expect to grow an industry out of nothing. However, is there a way that we can chart how fast we've been growing? Do you have any statistics that you can possibly share with us?
I can tell you from a Jordanian that you like it now because you have the next question for me about
I am ready for you.
So I'll tell you about my Jordanian experience today. We have been running the Jordan Gaming Task Force, which is an initiative from the private sector, supported by Our Majesty King Abdullah. But we have...
How does that work? A private sector initiative supported by the government.
You know, in Jordan the government is something and His Majesty Fund is another thing. Okay. So the private sector, we set this kind of task force and we built something called the Jordan Gaming Lab. In 2 years, we trained more than 1,400 people in this lab. In this lab, already we have people 14 to 16 years old from school, already have 6 apps online, 6 games on the App Store. We see parents bringing their children, bringing them to the lab to work the whole summer vacation. So the changes is there. The number of companies that is coming and closing at the same times are healthy for the industry to come to the right steps to build the ecosystem. So the numbers, I'm telling you, today from a very small lab that with capacity of 60 people to host, we did the 1,400 people in less than 2 years. This year we are targeting 3,000 people. We already, the first Q1, we did 500 training on an average 2 day. And that's the future. That's the grassroots that you need to build for the future to see the games every week.
Mohammed, do you have any? You want to tell us about your presence in MENA, for example? Has grown a number of people who are taking licenses, how that has grown?
Yeah, we've actually seen a sort of a gradual growth. There are a couple of reasons. Corona, we've only joined Corona since last December, so my input is really limited to that extent. But we've seen growth of about 25% from licenses that are acquired in the region. And I'm quite honest, the focus are out of Jordan. Probably second is Egypt, and then Saudi Arabia. Okay, this is sort of the trend. And then I think UAE after that, based on licenses. Okay. And just to sort of, now we're siding against you. In regards to the sort of the shutting down, or I have to reiterate Noor's point about having gaming companies shutting down. Is that necessarily a bad thing?
I haven't even asked that question.
Well, I know I'm preempting the attack. So basically, I think it's a great thing. I think it sort of distributes the seeds of new entrepreneurs, new startups.
Okay, let's get back to. I want to ask Ayman once quickly. So, Ayman, from your perspective, from a global perspective, or from other emerging markets that you might have worked in, how have you seen that growth, and maybe what are lessons that we can learn from the growth of the industry perspective, maybe from Ireland, right?
Yeah, I think it comes back to kind of success breeding success, right? If we'd had this conversation 10 years ago and said the two of the biggest companies in Finland were going to be games companies, you probably would have thought, well, no, Nokia is going to be the biggest company there, and look what's happened to them. And the reason the Valley is so successful, there's so much investment, there's so much stuff going on in countries like that, is that people made a lot of money from technology. They're investing a lot of money back into technology because they understand it. In Ireland, when I was starting my first company, a lot of people had made money from property, and you would go to them going, hey, we want to do, mobile game. Back in the day when we did J2ME games, right? This is kind of proper old school now. And they would go, I don't understand this. Unless it's Google, I'm not going to give you any money. So that idea of kind of skills and understanding developing over time is a big deal, right? I think when people start to see games becoming massively successful, they'll start to invest in them. It's really interesting. Like in the 1980s, everyone wanted to be like an actor or a singer. In the 90s, people wanted to be in a rock band. In the early part of the 2000s, they wanted to be in rave bands. And now people have watched the movies like The Social Network and look at Supercell and Rovio and companies like that making $1 million a day or more and go, well, now I want to be a developer. And the appetite is there. There's an initiative in Ireland called Coder Dojo where, like that, they get kids in, they teach them how to code on iOS, on Android. I think the youngest developer in the world is a 10-year-old Irish kid who released a game reasonably recently on the App Store. So those kinds of trends are happening everywhere. People understand the potential, and tools like Corona and cross-platform tools that allow you to develop on multiple platforms that help you along the way are huge parts of that. So we're seeing massive growth, and we're seeing games coming onto the Kiip network every day from countries that some of my colleagues have probably never even heard of. So it's happening everywhere. The appetite is there. I think it's how we support it and what sort of initiatives governments can do and regional bodies can do as well to support it and push it a little bit more.
Interesting. Before I go back to this failure question, and I agree with you that the failure is not a bad thing, but I actually want to take a question from the Twitter feed. We had someone ask, who's paying for games, children, teens, or adults? Yeah.
Overall, worldwide, if you look into who's paying first, female, this is one, more than male.
Interesting.
Second, and that's interesting of how we change our look of our teams inside of our operation, hiring more females into our operation. And ages between 25 and 40 are the highest in terms of payment. In-house purchase is still female also.
Yeah.
So I think that's the age group on the mobile side, paying for in-apps or for download the premium games.
For us, we're looking at at least from the Corona perspective, one thing that was surprising when I joined Corona, I looked at them, is the success of the Kindle Fire. Actually, because the Kindle is based on an Android platform, but one of the things we saw is actually a lot of the developers were making relatively good revenue out of the Kindle. purely because I think there's a much more mature audience on that platform. So if you compare a pure native Android to a Kindle, actually we see a much more revenue coming out of the Kindle more than actually even sort of a vanilla Android. But similar statistics when it comes to sort of the demographics.
Including females.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Absolutely.
So I spend a lot of my time going out and talking to brands and ad agencies, right? And you go in and you say, hey, you should be involved in games. Loads of people play games. And they're like, oh, it's like spotty teenagers sitting in their room playing games, right? No one else plays it. And then you pull out the statistic that the average mobile gamer is a 28-year-old female. And they hit the roof kind of going, what? You know, and you say how much time moms spend. And there's not a brand in the world pretty much that doesn't want to talk to moms at some stage in their product life cycle. You say how much time moms spend on games, how much money they spend on them, how engaged they are with puzzle games.
Can you share some of those statistics actually with us?
Which, I mean, it's
about moms?
Yeah,
like how much moms play games?
I mean, it's hours and hours a day. It's about an hour and 20 minutes a day. You see
Hour and
people,
20 minutes a day.
Playing various different puzzle games, builder games. They'll spend about maybe 8 or 10% of that time playing it with their kids, and then they'll hand the device off to their kid. So we see massive amounts of time being spent by moms in kind of casual type games that you can pick up, play for 5 minutes, put down. So it's like a little snack break, effectively, that they take.
Interesting. Very interesting. How many people in the audience expected that? I don't think a lot of people.
Well, I think just yesterday I had a conversation with Russia, and she was talking about the Game Expo for girls in Saudi.
Yeah, game developer
I
conference.
was
Game
actually
developer
quite
conference in
surprised,
Saudi.
because that's
Huge,
pretty for
huge
girls
audience.
only.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. So let's get back then to this question. And guys, if in the audience you have questions and you want me to, I'll take questions also at the end. But I am monitoring the Twitter feeds as well. So if you have specific questions that you want to ask, I'll put them in. One thing that we have seen in the last year is a lot of gaming companies close down. And we've seen some of them really write about it and talk about it. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But I do want to know, what can we learn from them? And like we've seen Wizards close down in Jordan. We've seen Taktek close down in Jordan. Why is that, and what can we learn?
My definition for the closure is totally different. They did not close. They are revamping the entrepreneurs are still there. Probably few of them went and joined other companies, but the guys are still trying their best to go back and establish their companies. For example, Taktek, the team is trying to establish a Madfish, the new company called Madfish. The guy from Wizard is one of the founders, the co-founders are trying to find a company. So the entrepreneur did not fail. What failed is the equation. The equation today, it's maturity from both parties, the entrepreneur and the investor. And if you put only the efforts on the side of the entrepreneur to learn and take the business plan forward, and the investor is looking for the Excel sheet by end of the day and doing his calculation, you will see failure. Okay, or you see companies trying to find a new investor or revamping or changing their model. Plus, the moment Taktek or Wizard or whoever was closing from the region, Atari was closing. So Atari was down. And you heard about the split of Atari operation between France and the US. Zynga was totally changing their business model. We have to go back into 2011, 2012. There was a big bubble of users over the Facebook online games. Something happened there. Everyone now is going to the mobile. There is a complete change in the business plan. Those guys with no exposure in the Middle East, in Jordan or whatever, are trying their best. They are trying to learn from you guys.
Right. But what I'm saying is that what is it that they do wrong
nothing,
that other people can learn from?
Nothing wrong.
I've heard some stories, right? So for example, I guess the stories of Wizard, and even though against advice from their investors and others, they were saying, guys, focus on releasing games, focus on releasing more games so that you can learn from them. Instead, they spent a lot of their time working on one big game and trying to really fix it and make it perfect, and then essentially ran out of money.
That's a different.
But this is what I think is important to teach anyone.
You cannot
learn
if
from.
you are building an MMO game like what they were doing, you cannot release more than one game every 2 years. You cannot. If you are doing a mobile game, you can push me to do 10, 15 games every year, even every month if you want. So So Wizard was doing, for example, a big game, and this big game, you cannot build 10 games like this game every year. This big game was a potential at that time of the year, at that time of Facebook, Zynga era that we were living all. So the problem that you cannot turn an elephant to a bee in one day. You cannot turn a bee like me working on the mobile games to an elephant to do an MMO today. So that's the issue, Omar.
The other thing is this: who says that the investors know what they're talking about? You know, hindsight, maybe they should have, but there's absolutely no way that you can tell me that the investors knew what they're talking about.
Okay, that's a side story.
No, I know.
Eventually, we learned
But
that maybe.
that's not
my
necessarily
question
true.
is, I'm going to question the whole viability then of someone here building an MMO that is going to be successful because it's going to require a huge amount of resources and may or may not work in the end.
No, but the point is that it's not true that that was the reason. You could never know why this particular company shut down. I wouldn't say failed, you know, why they shut down. And the other thing is, it's sad that 4 companies have shut down and now we're making a big deal out of it. Companies shut down every day. But it's the sad part is there are such a significant number of the gaming industry. That's the problem we should recognize, not whether, you know, they shut down and why they shut down. No, why aren't there more companies that even if 50 companies shut down, which happens in the US and Europe probably on a weekly basis, you know, this is the problem we need to tackle, is how can we encourage, or what can we do, whether it's us on the panel or the governments, is to allow more people to develop more games. So if 50 companies shut down, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
But it's sad that 4 people, and they're all over the bloody news.
You
I don't
know,
know. And I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, what can we learn specifically from these failures that can help us move forward? I'm not saying it's a big deal at all. We see lots of companies shut down,
Yeah.
and that's not a bad thing. I agree with you, and I agree that it helps kind of take people to the next level in terms of their development. But if there is any concrete things that we can take away from this, I would love to be able to do that so that we can help other people who are developing games not make the same or gain from that experience. That's not say the same.
One thing is that these companies, if you notice, they're all funded companies. I mean, there aren't any companies which are, you know, self-funded, or which is actually an interesting thing. Is maybe you know, they should have more
I
self-starters.
100% agree. Talking about Faisal Wad, we have been, you know, if I was in their position today, I would be closing. If I wasn't self-funded for the past 9 years, it will be the same situation. The good thing about self-funding, it is hard, but it will keep you longer.
Yeah.
How come?
Because the decision, you know, today.
Because you take decisions that don't depend on other people's money.
Exactly.
Okay. So what about investment? This is something that we were touching on earlier, right? What about relationships with investors? Are investors putting money in MENA? What are their expectations? What are your thoughts on this?
You can go first because mine's going to be ugly.
Mine is a bit. Investment is not yet there in the right. You know, you need smart money, and that's another thing. You need mature, smart money from the investor. We need our investor to go and sit in the GDC, in the Game Development Conference, as we sit and listen to people talking about the gaming industry. No such major investment is happening in the region from local money, but we can see in the past couple of months that investors started to talk about mobile gaming and mobile apps, etc. So things are moving slowly. The tickets are very small, which is fine for starting in the Middle East. Ourselves, when we tackled an investor outside of our region, but you know, if you have today the reality is the mobile, and investor knows that, and it will come in very soon. I encourage whoever is planning a project for the mobile, as Muhammad said, go self-funded until you put, you know, good muscles on yourself and go funding. You need to help next time, and this is my message to you.
Okay,
You bring investors.
I like it.
You bring investors also, you know, to the panel, and you challenge investors on such topics about, you know, as you are challenging us, why the companies are closing. Bring the investor and tell them why you took the decision to close the company, why the game was close to be launched with Chilingo and you decided to put in the garbage. Bring investor and let us listen as an entrepreneurs or people in the about, you know, their experience.
Yeah. Sorry if I jump in.
Oh, no.
My opinion about this probably will upset many people in the investment field, especially in the MENA. It's incredibly disappointing because the way the investor community here, first of all, I feel they're not bothered to learn about you know, what game developers want. I mean, they want to come in and give you this big strategic vision and you should do this and that. But any startup company, any indie development company, they want much more tactical stuff. I mean, they want very sort of, you know, grassroots information, hand-holding. You know, they don't want to know whether you can, you know, get them a massive publishing deal. They want sort of very small steps to help them. And the problem is, at least with some of the investors that I've spoken to, is they, you know, they have all these grandiose ideas, you know, but, you know, game developers don't want that. They want at least very basic stuff. You know, like what Noor is saying, the investors are not bothered to get educated about this field. And then if you ask any startup company, the answer is, go get traction and make some money, come back to me. Like, if I get traction, I got money, why the hell would I come back to you? You know, what value are you going to add to me? And to be quite honest, specifically in the gaming, I think close to zero. I mean, what can an investor add value to a game development if that individual investor has no background in gaming or distribution or monetization? There are very few that I know of that can add genuine value. I think Noor maybe can, or...
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the smart money argument is the biggest one. I mean, I think there's two issues that I always saw when I was raising money for startups in this part of the world as well, was the valuations were incredibly low. So you would go in and you would pitch an idea and they would go, well, I want 50% of the business, or I want some absurd amount. Whereas you would give away maybe 20 or 25% of your business for a similar raise in the US. So low valuations, there's a lack of smart money, a lack of understanding of the market. And if you look at the VC funds in the States that are doing the best at the moment, like Andreessen Horowitz or Google Ventures, they're hiring people who will add value to your startup to work across their entire portfolio. So Google are hiring design guys, they're hiring marketing guys. Andreessen Horowitz has an in-house HR team. They have all of these little things that help you out so that you can go and focus like a laser beam on your product. And but the interesting thing is that I do think that the bigger kind of European VCs and American VCs, they're like, if anyone watched the movie Lord of the Rings, right, it's like the Eye of Sauron. The Eye of Sauron is slightly on this region now because Cobone sold recently and people are going, e-commerce works, what else works? And also people look at things like Peak Games and go, wow, Peak Games is, you know, on Facebook, one of the, I think, second or third biggest company by volume in terms of all of the different games that they publish. So there is an eye on this part of the world. There is a recognition that, you know, smartphone ownership in the UAE and Saudi is the highest in the world percentage-wise. There is a growing recognition that this is a market that's poised to do really, really interesting things. I think the difficulty is going to be getting that smart money to bring their money over here and invest it.
If I can add one last point.
Yeah, sure. And I'm just going to, sorry, I want to make a quick comment that I'd like to start taking questions from the floor. I mean, I have been taking already from the Twitter feed, but if you have specific questions and you haven't been tweeting them, prepare them, and we'll continue with this. And I have also some questions I've taken down that I can share if the floor doesn't have any.
The other thing that I see is with investors here, they're very, even though they're VC and they're supposed to be, you know, calculated roulette players, you know, they're risk averse. I mean, imagine you go to an investor and say, listen, I'm going to be a game studio. I'm going to make about 10 games and 9 of them are probably going to fail. The guy is not going to give you a single penny, which is the reality. This is what game developers is about. You know, you need to be able to be, it's a marathon, it's a long-term game, as in you have to have confidence in the team, you know, Noor's team and his ability and his concept that, you know what, the first game might fail, the second game might fail, and then it's a learning process that within sort of the 6th game, okay, you're about breaking even, and then you're going to make the hit on the 8th and the 9th, 10th game, you know. No VC, in my mind, that is willing to put their money and go for the long run and take the hit. You have to take the hit and be ready to accept it.
Great, interesting. I think it's fascinating that our panel kind of agrees that you shouldn't go to investors, which is it's an interesting insight from a panel like this. I'd like to put in maybe a comment that I saw recently. NBC Ventures invested in Falafel Games, and they've been doing this kind of for sand.nbc.net, I guess. And I think that's might be an interesting thing, right? We're talking about what is the value that they can bring.
Exactly.
We're talking about if you build it, actually you really need to focus on getting them to come. Partnering up with a media fund or a strategic investor who has strong media access could be a smart idea for developers. Questions from the audience. We have to wrap up in about 7 minutes, or we'll go right there.
Hello. Yeah. Malik Tafaha from Taktek. 2 questions. One, none of you mentioned the console market. I know social gaming is big, casual gaming is big, but the console market is pretty big itself. with the upcoming new generation, the PS4 already announced, with focus on social aspects, indie game support, integrating the smartphone devices that we have into the games, the second screen movement, etc. Two, for the investment, I also find it weird that no one mentioned the Kickstarter revolution, because over 1,000 games were funded over the past year in 2012 using only Kickstarter. That's a great push for people to self-fund their games from crowdsourcing. So Kickstarter and the console market. Thank you.
Actually, I have both of these on my paper. So great. Let's try to keep our answers snappy so that we can cover more questions. But what do you guys think about? First, let's talk about the console market.
You can.
We are not ready yet. So it will take time to be ready from an investment side and maturity of our teams to enter into the console. And it will come. There's a couple of companies. I can mention one of Jordanian companies, SquareCat, who's trying their best to enter into this field for the past years and investing. We will come, but I don't think we are ready yet with our teams and our investment to tackle into this very deep pocket kind of investment thing called console. And God knows, it's our dream as gamers. You know, when we start with a mobile or online, we dream to have a console game. We dream to reach to our childhood back again, playing our own games.
So
but
funny, I feel like I played those in my childhood, but now I feel like the market is so much bigger for other types of gaming. You guys have different thoughts?
I think the model when it comes to console games now is changing to more digital distribution, which I think it's great, but the barrier of entry. I mean, you've seen our discussion today. Barely people raising funding to develop mobile games, which is a fraction of the cost of making a console game. So for them to be able to raise funding and convince the investment community that, you know what, I'm going to build a fantastic PlayStation 4, the new Xbox game, is a big step. I think the first step is we need to dominate and establish a very strong mobile game ecosystem or development community, and then most probably it will move in that direction. And like Anur said, with Cricket, they're developing a PlayStation 3 game, I think, which is actually doing really, really well. It's a great sign. But again, it's a well-established big company.
Yeah, I mean, for us at Kiip, our focus is almost totally on mobile at this point. I mean, the console side of things is interesting, but it's a much longer play. It's a much bigger issue for us. I mean, on Kickstarter, which you mentioned, yes. I think it's an amazing source of funding, and Indiegogo and all these kind of different platforms that are out there. I think the difficulty sometimes with Kickstarters, it comes back to what Omar mentioned earlier. There's an assumption, and I know people who've started projects on there, of that if we build it, they will come. Like if I put a Kickstarter page up, my project is going to get funded. You know, success. You know, established Kickstarter page, tweet link, ... profit is what people assume is going to happen, and it's not the case. I mean, getting funded on Kickstarter is almost as hard as getting into the top 10 on the iOS store, right? Because you've got to spend a huge amount of time promoting what you're doing. You've got to get a huge amount of buy-in from people for what you're doing. But as a means of getting investment, I think it's great. Indiegogo is probably a little bit better because I think it has a broader geographical reach. I think with Kickstarter, you still have to have a UK or a US bank account, but Indiegogo, I think that you can run projects from pretty much anywhere in the world. And with Indiegogo, you get all the money that's pledged, even if you don't hit your target.
Maybe I'll comment on the Kickstarter. I think the Kickstarter model is great, not for that particular reason, not for the investment, but actually as a reality check. You know, you probably have met many people who think they have the best idea and they will not share it with you because they're worried you might copy it. You know, well, news, 10,000 people next to you have exactly the same idea. But, you know, we should encourage people in the MENA to be able to go to Kickstarter, even though it might fail. But you know what? I think that's a positive thing. It's a reality check. As in, if I don't share my idea with anybody else, I don't know how good it is. Maybe it's not good enough. Maybe it is good enough as a starting point that I can build on. You know, putting it on Kickstarter, you get immediate feedback. I mean, it could be brutal, but it's better that you educate yourself and learn, and then go to the Kickstarter and then do it right.
Questions from the audience? Other questions? Gentleman up front.
Sumit from Microsoft, I can see him.
Sorry?
Hi.
Umit, the guy from Microsoft.
I'm from Alpha
Yeah, I have this question. You're going to ask.
So I'm proposing a question from a mobile operator point of view. I heard you guys a bit pessimistic about the role of the mobile operator, or it has been. But now we are changing, at least in Lebanon. And we're not only a mobile operator, we're an app store also. So I would like to know what you can add to a mobile operator and what do you believe an operator should, how he should work with you. I mean, what kind of a business model would you be looking for?
Great. So maybe I can rephrase that question a little bit. What are you looking for in a mobile operator?
Yeah,
Would
in
that
terms
be
of
good?
adding value to them and what value they can add.
Well, I think that I want to focus on the what value you guys can add to them, because they can add value to you by giving you content and games. But
No, but
what do you want?
the bottom line, the revenue also, if you can focus on that part. In
The
terms
size of it, you mean?
No, in terms of how they can also add value in terms of money, not only in terms of content.
Okay.
We'd like your data. We'd like your data, your customer data. I think that would be pretty useful from our perspective in terms of Kiip and in terms of how you make revenue. Verizon is one of our investors and put money in our Series A round. So there are different types of revenue sharing partnerships that we can work on in terms of games within specific app stores and various different things like that. But from our perspective, the number one question that we get asked by brands and agencies all the time is, how can we target this to a 28-year-old housewife in region X or in city Y? And that's the type of data that operators have in truckload. So that, for me, is the biggest thing that we could get back. In terms of revenue, there are a million ways that we could do it.
And I think operators, we as a company, we have a good, we built something for the past year with Omnia, one of the operators in Jordan, and it's a relation of a team that works together to build the community. The data is why we need data, because the conversion rates are very high when we get the data, and that's what happened. So there is, as you know, give us an access to your data, including who's your user, their bills, and give us how many iPhone, Android devices that you have it on your database, and both of us will make money out of it, directly or indirectly, directly through selling in-app purchases or selling the premiums, or indirectly through bringing Pepsi Cola or bringing whatever brands inside our games. So data is major.
Let's say from a Corona's perspective, I think because we're a platform developer, making it easier for our customers or our developers to actually deliver the games that are compatible, whether it's with your in-app purchase or your sort of billing mechanism, would help us help you, in a sense that you need to be a little bit more proactive to come up to us and say, listen, Corona, or whatever other third-party product, here's our APIs, we are going to work with you to integrate our billing mechanism or our some sort of social system, whatever it is that you guys have integrated in our system. So a Corona developer, for example, can immediately up to speed get access to the telco infrastructure, whether it's billing. This is great for us because we will help you promote it, and anybody developing in our system will have easy access to tap into yours.
Just one of the tweets, just to get it very fast. When we talk about the console game cost, about millions, it's not the coding part or the creation of the console. That's peanuts. The console part, the expensive part, is the marketing part. And that's the way where the millions goes. It's not the 10 people who are working on the game for 1 or 2 years.
Okay, we're going to take our last question. The gentleman from Microsoft.
Hello. I will ask a personal question, but I don't think that this is, I'm only one confronting this one. I have a niece about age 3. And for example, when I give him a device, when I give her a device, she's always downloading games and kind of stuff. But I don't feel comfortable because there are lots of games. And what do you think? Is there any real opportunity for a game store for age 3 or 4 kind of stuff? Because I really want to have a game store that only small children or other kind of stuff can reach.
What was the question?
If I understand your question, is there a opportunity in games for small children, for young children?
Actually, game stores is not safe. There are lots of games for violence and other kind of stuff. But everyone has niece or children here, so and when you give them a device, they download lots of applications. But what I want is there may be. Do you think that is the real opportunity for creating a new game store just for children?
I think yes is the short answer. One of the big debates that's going on in free-to-play gaming at the moment is the amount of in-app purchases that people put into kids' games. So you get all of these stories in the papers where kids have racked up hundreds or thousands of dollars worth of in-app purchases in games because they know their parents' passwords and they just enter them and click buy. You know, and you get tons and tons of games. But Yeah, the exposure to
I want to give them the game store so that they can choose their games and they can play. But I want it to be safe as well.
So I think there's a market for it. I think there's a market for it because of all the apps that are out there that are unsafe. I also think there's a market for a game store for kids where the games don't have in-app purchases.
Okay.
That was.
Can I just quickly?
Yes.
Well, I think there's a massive market when it comes to this. But I think it's a totally untapped market for this kind of age group. Purely because if I have an older kid, I know exactly I'm measuring how much I'm going to give them. But a child, a toddler, their limit is my bank account. I don't calculate I'm spending $9.99. So I think from a monetization is great. From that, I think it's going to be a little bit difficult from sort of securing or controlling or curating the App Store. I think it's going to be down to the operating system vendors such as Microsoft or some other where they can actually control the interface specific to a particular age group or selection, like what you guys have. I think that's the way it's going to happen, not through the App Store.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. Thank you for the panelists. I'm just going to quickly remind us of our main themes. We said investors, stay away from them. Don't think that if you build it, they will come. Getting them to come is almost as hard as building it. Women actually are your primary audience. And the industry has a big way to go. And part of it is about training and development of skills. And this is part of the process. So thank you all for joining us on the panel. Just a quick note, we want to try to catch up slowly onto our schedule again. We gave you guys some time in the morning to get back into the halls. So the coffee break will go on until 11, where our next panel will start. You've got 20 minutes, have your coffee, get your food, and then get back in the halls. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. That was fun.
It was good.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you. Yeah, it was great.
Awesome.